Hello, Mark. How are you this morning?
I'm pretty good, Paul. End of the year, so I'm feeling good.
Yeah, all good. Lovely. Well, thanks for making the time for this conversation.
Pleasure.
Really, I don't think we'll go for more than about 10, 15 minutes. I'm just interested in hearing an example because you did the TLIM program a little while ago now. Uh,
hmm
just an example of having used the materials in practice. So what was the context? What did you do and what was the outcome?
Okay. Um, Let me start by saying I found the materials really rich, and I've been dipping in and out of them. So, you've sort of what you've done with the TLM, which I liked, was, you have done all this large literature review and pulled it all together in this very useful package. And it's a bit like you're quite agnostic. So you've looked at all of the religious leaders in team coaching and the different material in the articles, and you brought together an agnostic view on um, a framework, a broad, multi-complex framework that people can play with and adapt. And that's what I've been doing. So I have found that one aspect of the TLIM framework is the emphasis on how important communication is,
Mhm.
and the sort of the presumption that in the absence of having really effective communication in whatever the team is, uh, that they're not going to achieve their potential. They're not going to be as effective as they could otherwise be. So if you can focus on getting that right and elevating the capability within the team around communication, then you go a long way towards getting more productive and effective teams. So
Mhm.
that really, the material in the TLM is around communication. I've been drawing on a lot with different teams, and I'll sort of expand on that in a second. Um, I have also found I had done some work with David Cantor's structural dynamics material
Mhm.
previously, but what you've done in the TLM is you've framed it in a nice way and you've got some good exercises to use. So I've been using the material around that, and also the other piece in the materials that I've been drawing on, um, beyond the communication piece and beyond the structural dynamics piece. There's lots of good stuff in there on building trust,
Mhm.
and I've been dipping into that and drawing it into stuff I've been doing. Um, I've been working this year with four teams, roughly, two boards, um, no, three boards actually, two not-for-profit and one commercial finance sector board, and I have used the dialogue stuff for all three.
Right.
Um, and interesting, and when I talk about the dialogue stuff, I'm talking about dialogue in the sense of Bill Isaac's definition of what dialogue is. So dialogue from Isaac's perspective is when people turn up with a view to sort of listen in a way that turns off all their noise, to understand, listening to understand and gain insight into what other people are saying, um, asking questions to gain insight to what they're saying, and then expressing their views respectfully. And if we can get groups engaging in dialogue in that Isaac's type sense, and you've got some lovely exercises in the TLIM that I've been using, particularly around listening and particularly around voicing.
Mhm.
And I've been using that pretty much in all of the teams that I have worked with. So um, the listening model that you'd actually developed, that you've got some exercises in there, I have found works well in the two boards that I've worked with, to
Yeah.
getting the boards to be boards are interesting because they're weird teams. They only meet monthly, bi-monthly. Um, they are all sort of needing to be independent and looking after the best interest, and they've all got fiduciary duties and stuff like that. But to function effectively, they have to work as a board, and they
Mhm.
have to work collectively. So they're interesting teams to work with. Um, and they're all made up of very clever, capable, successful people. But what's interesting is they don't often, in my experience, engage in dialogue in a particularly effective way. And
Mhm.
it's always a bit of a struggle for the chair to get the potential of a board to come to play.
Yeah.
Um, and so doing the work with the boards on dialogue has proven to be really important and really helpful. And similarly with the two boards that I've done a fair bit of work with, the work on structural dynamics and playing around with um, getting the boards to understand their own individual propensities, preferences, styles of communicating, styles of operating, has been useful to
Mm.
getting them to recognize the diversity that's in the room and also how to leverage that. And that's the same with a couple of leadership teams that I've been working with during the year as well. So I've drawn on the TLIM, some exercises and stuff in there to work with those teams. Um, Let me sort of focus on one team in particular, just to sort of illustrate what I've been doing. So this was, well, I'll talk about two. One, one team is a commercial team in the finance sector, and one of the things we recognised in terms of that team was there had been a breakdown in trust.
Yeah.
Uh, it had happened over a period of time and small steps, and then all of a sudden it was quite not functioning as well as they really wanted and had been. And so one of the things that we did was recognise that we need to go back to basics and just unpack how they were working and look at the way they were communicating. And so we then picked up some of Isaac's work on dialogue and explained the model and took them through it all. And then we played with it. And it's sort of interesting because boards don't tend to play. You know, they're beyond that.
Mm. Yeah.
And the same a bit with senior execs too. They sort of they're not necessarily drawn into playing. But what we did with the exercises was we talked about what does effective listening look like. And so you've got a lovely model where you differentiate between listening for gaps, listening for words and meaning, and listening for um, deeper meaning and understanding where someone's come from, and then for their identity, going down and deep into the values. And it's not a complex theory, not a complex model, but actually applying it really opens up people's sense of how effective they are or aren't or have been listening and what good listening looks like,
Mm.
and getting them to play and do exercises with each of these different types of listening so they can actually get okay, yeah, I get it intellectually, but now I'm feeling it. And I found that to be quite powerful and useful in terms of elevating people's sense of what good listening looks like and how well they have or haven't been doing it and what they need to be doing to get better.
Mm.
And I've done that sort of exercise with using the listening skills and some of those different types of listening with pretty much every team I've been working with this year. And I've found that each team has valued that. And then we've also used the sort of feedback stuff and the voicing, and there's a few exercises in there that I've drawn on to help people practice what it's like to give feedback in a constructive, effective way,
Mm.
and how it's important to give feedback, but not just what I call opportunity to improve feedback, but to give affirmative feedback in terms of helping people understand what they're doing well, what
Mm.
you're liking, what they're liking about each other. And that's been quite interesting in terms of the power of playing with that exercise in both of the boards that I've been doing a lot of work with,
Mm.
where you had these directors sharing with each other the things that they had particularly appreciated that they were each doing and bringing into the game. And then when we did this over a period of time, we got the levels of trust to be quite high. And then we played with the exercise again differently, where we were sharing. We were doing both affirmative, but then we brought into and if there was one thing you'd like to see that person do better to enhance their effectiveness and the contribution to the team and board, what would that be? And that was incredibly powerful. And I think they all appreciated the good intent that was coming into the room and the opportunities for them to each take that away and contribute more effectively moving forward. So that was quite powerful. Um, Similarly, the structural dynamics stuff has been useful. I've used it for a long time, or a couple of years at least.
Yeah.
But some of the work in the TLIM and the way you've treated it, I found quite useful. And there's a couple of exercises in there that I've incorporated into what I do to make it more fun as well, and to bring in sort of a bit of gaming, I suppose, but guessing and um, getting curious, allowing the curiosity to come in, and then doing something with it so that it was constructive, and getting them to understand the differences that are in the room. And there was a real one, a big aha moment for one of the directors in one of the teams when we sort of went through his propensities and preferences, and he realised he was quite different to a couple of the other directors who he was having a bit of tension with. And you could see him thinking, yeah, okay, they just come at stuff differently from me, and I need to be more conscious of that and modify how I'm bringing myself into the room. And so I think that particular team really enjoyed gaining that insight and knowledge and understanding of how they work, how they're different, and how they can leverage the team better. So
Mm.
that's been useful. Um, Interestingly, just going back to the dialogue stuff, um, I was doing some work with a very large, I wouldn't call it a team.
Yeah.
It was a team of teams or a group. There was 40 people that sat under a chief property guy, and they were coming together for a 1 day, 2 day conference sort of thing that they do each quarter.
Mm.
And we decided that it would be a really good way to set up that workshop by doing up front the material on listening.
Yeah.
And so we ran a program for, I think it was about 2 hours with the 40 people, breaking them into small groups and getting them to do the different exercises. Logistically, it was a bit of a challenge,
Yeah. Yeah.
but it really worked well. And it set up that whole 2 day conference because it really elevated for everyone that was there the importance and the value of listening, the different ways people listen, and it the feedback I got from the two senior guys that were running it was that it was the best session they'd ever had with that group. And I think it was because we set them up to have really good conversations and listen
Yeah.
up front. And then we let them go and do the substantive work that they were doing. So, it can be applied interestingly in broad contexts where you've
Yeah.
got lots of people. The other stuff that I did that was useful was just, and it's not rocket science in terms of lots of other you know Wagner and Hackman stuff, and all talk about the importance of getting groups aligned and having clarity around purpose and stuff. But the building trust piece, I liked the material where we were talking about what are the behaviours that build trust,
Hmm.
and allowing and getting them to work on stuff, but then giving them some of that material to think about how you build trust and what are we looking for, and when we're setting up a team charter or whatever you're wanting to do, what are the things you need to make sure you don't miss
Mm.
coming up. So I was sort of using that
Mm.
as well and found that that was a good contribution. But um, yeah, I've just been picking bits and pieces out of it depending on the team.
Yeah.
There's some stuff, the common communication stuff, I think is just important for everybody.
Yeah.
But the structural dynamic stuff, interesting. When do you choose to bring in team dynamics? And
Mm.
I know sort of there's an interesting philosophical conversation around that.
Yeah.
And but for me, it's sort of you don't want to leave that stuff too long, because it's so pivotal in the effectiveness of doing some of the fundamental setting up. Who are we? What is our purpose? What are our values? What are we
Yeah.
working on and stuff? But yeah, it's a sort of a delicate balance in terms of how you bring it in, when you bring it in, and I don't go too deep too early, because I think
Yeah.
people think it's a bit too new age if you go there too quickly.
Yeah. Yeah.
Mm.
Lovely. So I'm hearing that real focus on dialogue
Mm.
as a form of communication and the listening piece, and how you've tied that in with work on building trust and helping people get aligned around purpose and vision and so on. And of course, the structural dynamic stuff is ties very well into the dialogue stuff.
Mm.
Can you just tell us a bit more about the outcome of the work? What have you seen in terms of some of these teams, some of these boards, in terms of how they were functioning before you started doing the work
Yeah.
with them, and what was happening after you'd done the work with them?
Yeah. Well, the commercial finance related board, when I started working with them, we had some real problems because of some tension and conflict between the chair and a number of the other directors. Um, there's been a whole lot of series of events, but that board now is functioning at a very high level.
Hmm.
They've just done their performance review stuff, and compared themselves to 12 months ago, and they are engaging in really rich, constructive dialogue often. They are leveraging the talents within the board. They have dealt with some pretty challenging stuff during the course of the year very effectively, so their decision making's improved. Um, the feedback was very, very positive. That that they're and we didn't just rely on their own self-assessment. Because what I did was I went and
Yeah.
interviewed the executive team
Yeah.
to ask them, well, how are you seeing the board, and what are you seeing what have they done well that you've really appreciated, and what have they done that's caused you grief, and what suggestions, if you had one or two things you'd like them to do differently next year. The feedback from the executive was really positive. That they had one or two things they were suggesting, but
Mm.
compared to some of that feedback was the board has really come a long way from where
Mm.
they were. So that's sort of that board. The second board's feedback has been similar in the sense that the dialogue has improved radically. The way the directors have been working collaboratively and being more self-conscious of what they were doing that wasn't helping, and how they can do it so that it is helping. So I think the sense is that they have come a long way as well,
Mm.
and that they're just being a more effective board. Um,
Mm.
the exec teams have similarly reported greater clarity, greater cohesion, um, more effective communication, and better decision making. So they're there's been a consistency in terms of each of the teams has recognised that they have significantly improved. They all have work to do,
Yeah.
but they've all come a long way. And yeah, I think the value of working with the team coach, I think it is real.
Yeah. Lovely. Well, thank you for sharing all that, Mark.
That's my pleasure, Paul. Thank you for introducing me to some great stuff.
Thank you very much. Thanks, Mark.
Okay.